Hi everyone, it's Dr. RAMANI. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism. This channel is designed to help you understand something that often feels completely not understandable, to help you potentially navigate your way out of these relationships, teach you how to build boundaries, hopefully not get into them in the first place, and just sort of save yourself before things get even worse than they already are. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. If you want to be notified every time a new video comes out, just hit that notification button. And if you're liking what you see, give us that thumbs up. It helps this video get recommended to others who probably need to see this content, maybe even more than all of you, because you're already probably narcissism experts. So let's talk about an issue that's such an age-old issue, but is particularly relevant to survivors of narcissistic abuse. And I'll actually put it as a question. How many of you who are survivors of narcissistic abuse believe you have imposter syndrome? Drop it in the comments. Because I'm going to tell you what I believe. I believe that anyone who's experienced narcissistic abuse does end up with a case of imposter syndrome. So let's break down why. So I do believe that, yes, people end up developing imposter syndrome as a result of narcissistic abuse. So why is that? Let's just take a minute and break down imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is that sense that you will be found out as a fraud, that you don't belong, that you aren't qualified. It's the experience of feeling that other people are evaluating you as incompetent or unskilled or out of your game. It can leave people feeling anxious, holding themselves back, and the fear is often about being found out, whatever it means to be found out. It's the humiliation of being called out, and that fear can be enough to lead people to hold back or not even put themselves out there, or feel overwhelmed by anxiety when in any situation you feel like an imposter. Now, imposter syndrome can cut through all areas of life. Many people most pointedly experience it at places like work or school. At work, it can manifest as someone who believes that they aren't qualified for a job or they're in over their heads. In school, a person who feels incompetent in a more advanced class, or that they don't even belong at a school, especially if it's, I don't know, more elite or more competitive school. It can show up when a person is shopping in a fancy store or in the lobby of a fancy hotel or any place where barriers of class and money may be at play. And underlying it all are thoughts of being called out and simply of being not enough. This can also happen in relationships, feeling you aren't enough or don't deserve. And this feeling can really be drawn out in a narcissistic relationship because they have such a good front game. Like, yikes, this person is really successful, or really attractive, or really whatever they are. Ooh, I hope they don't see through me. Some people even feel like imposters in their own family systems. It doesn't matter how familiar a space is. Imposter syndrome is something that happens within us. The argument absolutely can be made, and I believe it's a very compelling argument, maybe because I'm making it, is that imposter syndrome is simply internalized depression and societal invalidation. And more often than not, it is societal. Systemic oppressions due to race, ethnicity, social class, gender, sexual orientation, you name it. Society and the systems that surround us do marginalize certain people, and those messages heard over a lifetime, and that anyone who's not from the group that holds the power internalizes that message and then feels like they're not enough and that they do not belong. And when people experience imposter syndrome, the challenge is we become really inefficient. We waste psychological energy. People inhibit themselves and they exhaust themselves with anxiety. Then it becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. People who believe they are imposters often have less power. They may be more inhibited. As a result, they may not perform as well. And then the assumptions about them, and even the ones they hold for themselves, that they're imposters, are reinforced. So now all of that is a sort of standard approach to imposter syndrome. But you're wondering, lady, get to the point, well, how does all of this relate to narcissistic abuse? Being a person who experiences narcissistic abuse results in permanent imposter syndrome for the people who've experienced it. What does that mean? Think about it. A lifetime, or at least many, many years of being told that you aren't enough, that you aren't that smart, that you don't know what you're doing, that you aren't that important, of constantly being gaslighted. Over time, you internalize the messages of dismissiveness and invalidation and minimization, and that you're not mentally well and your reality doesn't even exist. Survivors of narcissistic abuse go through the world forever feeling incompetent. If you experience narcissistically abusive patterns in childhood, these patterns impacted your sense of self and identity and your sense of competence. Second guessing and self-doubt became your primary psychological language, and that trails you into adulthood. Without exception, every survivor of childhood narcissistic abuse I have worked with felt incompetent in at least one area of their lives, and usually in more than that, in adulthood. And that resulted in a sense of otherness, that people could see that they are overcompensating, and of being an imposter. If you managed to get through childhood unscathed and started encountering narcissistic abuse in adulthood, while it may not be as imprinted on your psychological DNA, it still makes a strong impact and results in that imposter feeling. It may happen with a partner, a friend, or a mentor or boss. And as that gets internalized, you have that impostery feeling everywhere you go, work, socially, you name it, and it holds you back. And this has been the experience of most survivors, even after they get out of the narcissistically abusive relationship. The narcissist may go, but the imposter syndrome feeling stays. While not everyone who experiences imposter syndrome has been narcissistically abused, many have. For me personally, and I do consider myself the patron saint of imposter syndrome, I know where it began for me. The messaging from the beginning, not just from the world, but how I grew up. That I wasn't good enough, and my father and other male relatives wanted a boy. I'm not a boy. Checkmate, there's only so much I could have done about that. But hearing that messaging over and over, I didn't take the risks. I always felt I didn't belong amongst peers when I wanted to try new things like theater, singing, you name it. I didn't apply to the most competitive universities when it was time to go to college. I felt I wouldn't belong. And even recently, when I've been asked to speak at some amazing events, my last thought before I take the mic is this the audience that's finally going to see through me? I will spend hours and days prepping and studying and reading and researching. That's why I know so much, to offset the anxiety. And I know this so well. It's not the knowing, it's the sense of not belonging and the doubt and the fear of being viewed as incompetent. It's in my DNA. Enough people tell you in your life that you are incompetent or not valued over a lifetime, you believe it. But for me, the fight comes from my personal crusade of wanting to prove that survivors can pull the damned rabbit out of their hats, that with persistence, survivors will always get it done, even if we collapse into exhausted heaps afterwards. And I am blessed with a deeply patient team that listens to me ruminate for a while afterwards, after I make mistakes that I believe I made, and never talk about what went right. But these are the legacies that stay with us, that sense of never fully feeling comfortable in ourselves or the world. And for these reasons, fighting against narcissistic abuse is essential. We are losing too much potential with too many people walking around feeling like imposters. Narcissistic abuse clearly leaves a person feeling uncomfortable in their own skin, and that is also what imposter syndrome is. Not just being uncomfortable in our own skin, but uncomfortable in the world. As I said, and I am living proof, the only antidote is to spite that imposter inside of you and just get up and do it. Even as you believe that this is the day that the jig is up and you're going to be found out, you keep going. And yes, you will be very tired at the end of the day. I hope one day I leave a stage not feeling like I am an imposter, but I doubt that's going to happen. I just get up and keep fighting the good fight, because if I stop, then the narcissists win, and that feels worse than being an imposter. So please find that fight inside of you and fight it, and let that fight mobilize you. Narcissists, abusers, and manipulators want everyone to feel like an imposter, because then they can, in their entitled way, keep the world running in a way that works for them. So maybe if all of us are imposters, then none of us are. The grand irony is that the narcissists, with all of their insecurity, they may be the ones who feel like the biggest imposters of all. But since they rely on projection as their defense, they inject and infect us with their imposter syndrome, and they blithely go around leaving the rest of us doubting ourselves. The key to healing is for all of us to start building up our immunity to their toxic germs, working through that feeling and knowing that you are not alone. Every survivor of narcissistic abuse goes through imposter syndrome. It can help to know that lots of other people in the room feel like imposters too. Most of all, me. So I get this. Thanks again.